Thank you very much, and it's been quite humbling to be invited here today. In fact, when I saw the title of this last session, Entrepreneurship and Failure, well, you know what part I'm coming in at the end. When I was invited to come and speak here today, I was very excited. Told all my friends, all three of them, and then I got an email from Dan saying, with a few guidelines, and one of those guidelines was, don't talk about yourself. And then I thought, what the like fung, that is my area of expertise. And then the MC reads out the page on my background, so it leaves me with very little to say, really. But my message today is about conformity and how that is, if you like, the killer to creativity. And that creativity doesn't belong in any subject area or discipline. That, in fact, creativity comes from self-value and valuing differences. And the more we have that, we create a feeling of courage and the courage to fail and to create and to think differently. So, stepping outside the guidelines, I would like to talk about myself and put this in some context. I was dragged to school at age 5. I was one of those kids, if there's any kindergarten teachers here, I was the child that would be brought into the kindergarten class, and one of the adults in the room had to stand by the door to make sure that the runner didn't escape. If there was ever a gap there, as soon as there was a distraction, someone would wet their pants, I would be out the door. And that continued for about 10 years. In fact, my last 2 years at school, I was basically an invisible child or student. I'd learnt the trick of turning up to school, being seen, and then I would disappear either to a movie to watch. I think I've seen Tommy 15 times, or I'd go to one of the local music shops and drive them crazy with my poor rendition of Stairway to Heaven. So I was a self-taught musician, much like Chris, who was brilliant here today. Unfortunately, I was a terrible teacher of myself. But I had the opportunity to escape from school through the Air Force. At that time, there was an apprenticeship scheme where you could apply to, and luckily for me, it was a multi-choice test. In fact, I remember sitting the test, and they had an interview afterwards, and they said, you did particularly well in trigonometry. And, great. So I'd completely guessed the part on trigonometry. But then I was offered an apprenticeship. In fact, they had two choices, to go to the Air Force or the Army. In terms of the Army, had an apprenticeship musician course. And in the Air Force, it was as an aircraft technician at that stage, and I chose the Air Force because I liked blue. So I had no idea, but I was leaving one, if you like, I was able to get out of a 12-year contract and step into a 9-year contract at age 15 into the Air Force. But at least that was of my own choice. And the Air Force was a time of experience. I grew up rather quickly. I learnt to drink rather quickly. In both ways, I meant that. And but it allowed me to become more independent. I hated it, to tell you the truth. But throughout that time, I began at a very late age, in terms of football, to start playing football. This is Australian football. And I was told by others that I was quite good. I thought I had a talent at football. In fact, I had opportunities to go and play for the state, play for the Air Force, play for the Defence Forces, and I was starting to feel pretty good about myself because I couldn't make the football team at school. I was hopeless. I was, I just had no coordination. I was the perpetual 12th man in the cricket team. The only fun I got out of the cricket team was putting Denko rub in the protecting box of the team. So sport, I wasn't very good at. Music, I was, but the school I was at had no music program. So in the Air Force, I was able to continue, if you like, playing guitar, teaching myself drums, and then taking up football at the same time. I also, in the last stages of my contract with the Air Force, met my wife. We weren't married before, and I happened to meet her. I actually met her for the first time, and then we got married. But she changed my life, and at age 19, I was engaged. And here I am, 32 years after that, and we are married, and we have 3 wonderful daughters. And they are a sense of inspiration to me, always, as many parents would say. Perhaps not of my daughters to you, but of your own children. So it was that feeling of self-worth. And then I became quite dangerous, because now I started feeling good about myself. I realised actually my differences were my advantage, not a disadvantage as they were in school. I finished my high school diploma, if you like. I then applied to and got into university part-time. I did a majored in history, Australian history. So by the time I left the Air Force, I was offered a contract to play football, and also was able to go to university, and in a moment of madness chose to focus on teaching and do a second major, which was music. So I always remember the night before I started my diploma with my major in music, I started to teach myself how to read music. I've nearly got it down pat. I think I'm starting to get there, but it was quite frightening. In fact, Angelina Jolie and myself are very similar. That we both like movies. She entered a profession where one of her parents had been quite successful. And in fact, sadly, our football careers are very similar as well. So football wasn't a great success in terms of a career, but certainly teaching has been, and it's provided me with many opportunities. And if I'm going to criticise any schools or anything about schools, let me first say the great thing about being involved in education is you can go around the world and be surrounded by very, very good people. And I hope to say the same about today as well. We'll see what the applause is like at the end anyway. But there are, in the world now, UNESCO estimates about 27 million teachers. That is a lot of people. That is an amazing movement for good. For all these speakers today, you can see if just the teachers got on board with that around the world, it would be fantastic. We need another 15 million teachers if we're to provide an access to education for all the children in the world. And there is always a shortage of good teachers. We cannot have too many good teachers. In fact, we need a movement called Teachers Without Qualifications. We need everyone to take that responsibility. And there's a lot of teachers in Hong Kong. You'll see that every Friday afternoon, where they have their own social movement called Occupy Lai Kwai Fung. But there's a lot of good we can do here. So when Sophie talks about changing what happens here in Hong Kong, well, teachers are a very powerful force in education and in other ways as well. My message today in that first telling is about pathways for children. We have problem with children dropping out of school. Now, many here are from international schools, and maybe through that screening process, we don't get to see the whole picture. But let me tell you, a lot of children are disenfranchised from school, here in Hong Kong and around the world. And the reason being is they're dropping out, but they're not dropping into anything. What we need to do is provide opportunities and pathways for all the children to drop into and to drop back out of careers, back into education. That we need people that are artists, that are mechanics, that want to work with their hands, that know they want to start businesses at age 16. We need to encourage those differences, and we need to offer those pathways into that. But most importantly, at school, we need to value that. At the moment, we have a continuing movement of profiling our graduate as the straight A student, the student that hits the Ivy League, the student that behaves perfectly, the prefect, the head boy, the head girl. Great kids, but they are not the only profile of what is successful today. And by narrowing that profile, we disenfranchise the majority. So inclusion can help develop our schools, improve our education, and we can improve in terms of our teaching as well. If you look at the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, you'll see that every child should have the right to an education. And yet some of our best schools, with our best intentions to develop global citizens for tomorrow in their mission statement, we start the exclusion at age 5 or at that admissions level. That if they don't speak the language you want, if they don't have the academic record, if they have a special need that we hope to screen out, then you don't belong here at this school, go and find another school. And I don't think that is internationalism. I think inclusion is at the very core of internationalism. To be inclusive is to be a global citizen. So, as teachers, if we work in exclusive environments, then it's our job to start that movement of including more. It is going to add value to all, not just to the children that can now access the resources. I also believe that we need to increase our recruitment of teachers from focusing at the moment on grade 12 or the senior year of schooling to moving to those outside of school. The world is full of natural teachers. We need to bring those into schools, and we need teachers to have the opportunity for job exchanges out of school. Sometimes the best professional development can be working in an architectural firm, working in a lawyer firm, taking on a trade, working with children, working with some of these great social entrepreneurs. And we bring more of reality back into our school, which we really fight to do with our 1 week a year called Week Without Walls, or whatever it may be in your school. So what is encouraging this? What I find a danger here in Hong Kong is what I call Education Incorporated. That is these companies that are in the education or the business of education. Some of them may be fine, but I think there is a danger there because the solution to education is not through developing a global supply chain. HSBC may have that, but we don't see it as the answer to education. The one size fits all, the one profile of a successful student isn't the way to open up education. And setting fees at what the market will bear also isn't a way to include those that don't have the income to access that sort of education. Here in Hong Kong, we have more of that Education Incorporated being enlarged. Sometimes as charities that pay a massive management fee, sometimes the schools for profit themselves. But in either way, we need to be careful that Hong Kong doesn't lose its sense of itself through generic branding of schools. At the moment, we have a shortage of places for expatriate students into international schools. Some say 5,000 places. At the same time, we have government schools shutting down because of lack of student numbers or changing demographics. What I would like to see is more collaboration between government and non-government schools. We don't need more buildings in Hong Kong in terms of education. We need more collaboration. We need more inclusive schools. So if we could have teachers working together, children working together, using these buildings and increasing and making more efficient use of the huge resources we have, then I can see that Hong Kong can become a schoolhouse, a hub of education through inclusion in Asia Pacific and around the world. We have the resources, we just operate on a two-tier system. And Education Incorporated has a vested interest in maintaining that status quo. We have those that can afford the schools and those that can't. And at the moment, we see the government schools shutting down and more companies moving in to fill that void. I don't believe that is the answer. I mentioned HSBC before because as I came into the airport yesterday, I saw this on one of their posters and I thought, well, they've stolen my whole thing. But you can't have a cow or a person and then dress it up in a set of international values and call yourself international. What you need to do is actually make some serious choices on the structures within the school and step outside the comfort zone. So that starts with inclusion of all kinds, I believe. I think we have the resources. We certainly have the want, because I'm surrounded by people such as we have here today. But we can create a great model here in Hong Kong. We have if you like, a compact state to work with. We have this wealth of teachers, and we have the opportunity right now to make sure that government and non-government organisations can collaborate so that we are more inclusive to everybody, that our 27 million teachers around the world can actually be a movement for change. Thank you very much.